Full and uncut versions available on Patreon. Check in the description below.
Greetings once again, Pokemaniacs. Duuz-Diz-Din back again with more of the Pokemon Adventures manga, where previously, as Eternatus was wreaking havoc on Galar, Zacian and Zamazenta appeared in order to obtain the Rusted Sword and Rusted Shield in order to fight the beast. Unfortunately, a dark force had overtaken Henry, and he was desperate to keep the sword and shield in his possession to reforge them. But the Pokemon weren't having any of that and summoned the weapons towards them as they went up against Eternatus. Unfortunately, Henry was caught in the middle, disappearing in the process along with the other Pokemon. Leon and several of the gym leaders present were knocked unconscious by the same dark force, this poison that Eternatus emitted, and were knocked unconscious for several days. Thus ends the darkest day. With Chairman Rose now in prison, Oleana is now in charge of, well, his whole company, and tries to get in contact with a certain Miss Poison to find an antidote for the poison that Eternatus puts out. Meanwhile, Casey and Henry manage to, Casey and Marvin use Oleana's resources to track where Henry might have ended up, where it was either the Isle of Armor or the Crown Tundra, with Casey, Marvin, Hop, Marnie, and Bade all joining together to, split up to each of the locations to hopefully find Henry as well as the Rusted Sword and Rusted Shield, with Casey and Marvin going to the Isle of Armor, where Hop, Marnie, and Bade head for the Crown Tundra. Meanwhile, on the Isle of Armor, the newest applicants to the dojo on said isle, underneath former champion Mustard, the apprentices Clara and Avery managed to find Henry after he's transported to the island. Clara, who had actually mentioned mist poison to Oleana, gets in contact with Moon, and together with Mustard's son Hyde, are able to concoct a medicine that's able to get Henry back to the world of the living, essentially. Casey and Marvin make their way to the Isle of Armor, and are met by Clara, who is none too pleased with having more powerful people who might take the spotlight away from her and Avery. But Casey will not be stopped in finding Henry, who hears her loud voice in the distance. What'll happen next? Join me as I find out, won't you? Alright, a nice little cover page with a certain someone in the background there. Avery, Clara, and Mustard. A new encounter. And this is chapter 32, titled Boom! Reunion in a New Land. Oh, we catch up with the train to the Crown Tundra, where, Pinchurchin, I think. I always forget how to pronounce that. Is playing with Marnie's, Morpeko, which, get in here, Morpeko. Bade's just chilling. Hop is lounging while Marnie's on her phone. Hop mentioned, this tunnel's awfully long. We must be going through a pretty big mountain, huh? Marnie knows. Apparently, there are Pokemon that only live in the Crown Tundra, so this mountain must be what's keeping them away from other places. Suddenly, all of their rodent phones start to ring. Hop says, oh, Shield made it to the Isle of Armor. Suddenly, the door to the cabin opens, and, what was her name again? Peonia enters. He looks around, seeing the bewildered faces of everyone else, except for Bade, who's kind of dismissing her. And she immediately jumps onto Bade, saying, help! There's a persistent old man after me. Marnie says, old man? Hop says, you okay? Bade takes a moment and then puts her jacket around her shoulders. Marnie and Hop are a bit taken off guard, and then they start looking through their bags. Marnie saying, the wig I bought from Shilly. Why'd you buy that wig? Well, Hop says, the Shelly cup I got from my mum before I left Wedgehurst. Now decked out in an outfit, Marnie tells Peonia to hide her face with her collar, okay? And Peonia says, right. Enter a very large man saying, hey, Nia! Well, Peonia says, there he is! As the man approaches the kids, all of them look to him rather questioningly, and Bade seems to be taken off guard. As Peony says, hey, you kids, have you seen Nia? Hop, pretending to be on his phone, says, Nia? Peony says, a girl about your age. I know she was headed this way. Marnie pretends to think, saying, come to think of it. Hop says, she went into the car behind this one. Peony runs off saying, all right, thanks. And he heads off. Marnie and Hop look to each other as Marnie says, doesn't that man? And Hop says, yeah, he looks like Chair. And before he can finish, Bade says, he does not look like him. He looks exactly like who you were talking about, with Hop saying, I didn't even finish talking. Whereas Bade tells him, shut up. Peonia then takes the collar off of her face, saying, here, thank you. You seriously saved me. Now intrigued, Marnie asks, what happened? Peonia explains, saying, I was planning to take a trip to the Crown Tundra to catch some rare Dynamax Pokémon at the Max Lair. Then, when that geezer heard about it, he decided all on his own to come with me. Then he started calling it a one-on-one father-daughter adventure to find the truth about the Pokémon Legends of the Crown Tundra and put together the plan for this trip all on his own. Marnie questions, father-daughter? Is he, as in, he's your actual dad? Peonia says, unfortunately, yes. I mean, I'm fine with him taking on the travel expenses, but I really don't want to go along with his weird adventure nonsense. I took my pass and snuck out on my own, but then, and I have no idea how he found out about it, he followed me. Oh God, up until a bit ago, I had just been hiding in the bathrooms in every car, but they all got occupied, so I couldn't hide anymore. Hop seems to take this in, saying, so he finally found you, huh? And as Bade observes Peony, he thinks of her and her dad, and then pictures it as him and Chairman Rose. Oh my God. Oh, Hop. Oh, Bade. Buddy. I feel bad for him, honestly. Suddenly, Peony's voice kind of rings out, where is she? And she puts up her collar, saying, he's back. The train conductor is pushing Peony around, saying, well, trying to calm Peony down, saying, sir, please lower your voice. The other passengers will complain about the noise. The Peony says, what? You better not have hidden near from me. Bade suddenly starts coughing and then removes the costume. Peony says, traitor. As Peony drags his daughter off, he says, thanks, girlie. Hop turns to Bade, saying, Bade. Bade has no words. Marnie, kind of understanding the situation, just smiles, saying, how cute. Hop is bewildered, saying, what? Though Marnie says, heroic, wasn't it? Utterly aghast, Bade says, please stop. But then Marnie looks off wistfully, saying, but I do feel bad for Nia, don't you? And finally we're at the Crown Tundra Station. Oh my God, It hasn't been that long, but man, I'm feeling nostalgic for this place. Hop heads out, saying, oh, so this is the Crown Tundra. Suddenly a voice rings out, don't you fret. You and your super cool papa are gonna have loads of fun. Peonia then spots everyone and says, oh, the traitors. Marnie then chimes up, saying, Mr. Nia's dad, I have a request as another girl her age. Peony says, sure, what's up? I love how involved Marnie is right now. It's just like, look, I'd heard they didn't have a lot of screen time in all this, or they just, their plot lines weren't as involved, but I'm gonna be real. I wish Hop, Bade, and Marnie were all involved as much as this. Like, seriously, I wish we actually had them as involved as they are right now. Because if they were traveling around the Crown Tundra and the Isle of Armor hanging out with your main character, I would have loved that. Just everyone trying to improve or on a mission or something, that would have been cool. Marnie says, if one of us beats you in a Pokemon battle, I want you to let her journey around freely. Peony thinks on this, saying, I can't say I'm impressed by you sticking your nose into our family's business, young lady. But I am pretty strong, so there's no way I'll lose. I'll take you on. Bade chimes in, saying, since I'm the strongest, I should be the one to battle him. But Marnie rather seriously says, nah, not you. You'll probably lose on purpose. Bade is aghast, saying, what's that supposed to mean? Well, Hop tells him, no. But Peony's at the ready, saying, the name's Peony. Brace yourself, as he sends out his Caparaja against Marnie's, no, I'm thinking of every name around what this is. I'm thinking Impidimp, I'm thinking Grimmsnarl, and it's just like, no, that's not those names. Morgrim, Marnie's Morgrim, as Peony says, Oh, no. It's because of where the word bubble is coming out of. As Hop says, so Miss Peony uses a corporaja. With Bade saying, what about it? Hop says, oh, nothing. But getting dragged into weird trouble just as our search starts. Sticking our noses in others' business. He looks over to Peonia, who's yelling out, don't lose, traitor! Bade says, that's exactly how we ended up getting involved in outrageous events. Hop says, for sure. I wonder if things are going more smoothly for S.H.I.E.L.D. We then cut to the Isle of Armor at the Master's dojo, where Honey is questioning, huh? You want new students? With Clara and Avery immediately giving out a sigh of relief. Oleana asked us to take care of you. Pretty much so, I thought. Well, Avery says, I guess you jumped to conclusions there, Miss Honey. Mustard chimes in saying, here on the Isle of Armor, we didn't have to deal with the darkest day or any sort of Dynamax disaster. We all just trained every day the same as usual. So we're sorry if we don't feel the same sense of danger. Shield Marvin. Marvin says, oh, no worries. Honey then chimes in questioning, so you're here to look for someone and something then? Casey says, yes. As Mustard asks, you're looking for a boy named Sword. As he peeks over at Sword shakes his head. Honey says, all right, we'll have our students help you out, so feel free to use the dojo as you please. Think of it as a second home. Mustard then says, right. You'll be wandering around a lot on your search, so I have a Pokemon I'd like you to look after, even if it's just while you're here. There he is, and he brings out Kung Fu, saying, come on out. I loved Kung Fu, especially once he evolved. Let me know which version of Kung Fu you got. Well, the evolution of Kung Fu you went for at the end of your playthrough. As Casey and Marvin look upon Kung Fu, he pulls back. As Mustard says, training it so far, I know it has a lot of talent, but it's pretty shy, you see. It hasn't set foot outside the dojo much and isn't growing as I'd expected. I think it might be able to break out of its shell if it has more contact with the outside world. Clara and Avery then chime in saying, Master, is that the Pokemon you said you'll give to the trainer who clears all 3 Master Dojo trials, the Secret Armor? Mustard says, yes, why? Clara and Avery question, why would you give it to an outsider instead of a student? Mustard smiles, saying, because she's an outsider. You two can have your turn once you've properly finished your training. Clara and Avery do their best to hide their animosity towards this. Not very well, mind you. Casey then chimes in saying, Master. Mustard questions, what is it, Shield? Casey explains, I've already got 6 Pokemon, so I can't take care of it. Mustard says, oh, really? I see, then. He strokes his beard and says, he then calls out, come here, Sword. I choose you. Swordykins. Both Casey and Marvin question, Swordykins? And now, having been, sold out, Sword slowly rounds the corner, freaking out Casey and Marvin, who go rushing over with Marvin questioning, what happened to your hair? Henry rather despondently says, Master Mustard, with Mustard just giving the peace sign. But regardless, Casey is just shaking Sword's hand, saying, I'm so glad, thank goodness. I didn't think we'd get to see you right when we got here. Mustard then chimes in saying, now all you have left to look for are the rusted sword and rusted shield. Casey then says, and the antidote for Miss Poison too. If we have Miss Oleana send us the right data on the poison, I think we'll be able to get a better prescription. Marvin says, then we'll be able to help the champion and the gym leaders. That's a good reason for them to need to travel around the island. Casey then says, Miss Clara, you'll help us arrange things with Miss Poison, won't you? Clara says, as she's patted on the back, sure, I don't mind. Casey then drags off Henry, saying, let's go, Sword. But Henry says, but Shield. Casey questions, are you still not feeling well? Henry pauses for a moment and then drops to his knees, saying, I'm sorry, we couldn't keep Galar out of danger. And it was all my fault. Casey calls out, the poison had you confused. There was nothing we could have done. Henry looks to Casey saying, but you and Marvin know, right? When it comes to gear, I stop being able to think about anything else. When I think I need to do something, it takes up all my focus. And everything else gets blurry until I'm satisfied. Even if the poison hadn't confused me, I might have done the same thing. And Casey just says, so? Henry says, so, that's why right now. Casey just throws up her hand saying, I know you know. You saved a lot of trouble and weak Pokemon and people. I know you get all worked up over gear and don't think ahead because of it too. I know, but I've never said anything like you did a good job. Good thing, great job, or shouldn't you cut it out, did I? There have been times when I didn't like something you did, but I didn't speak up on those moments, so there's no way you'd know which things were good or which were bad. Since you're such an important friend to me, even if it make you unhappy, I should have told you about the things I thought were bad. So if you're going to say sorry, then I'm sorry too. Henry is taken aback, saying, but Shield, you didn't do anything wrong. And Mustard butts in, saying, all right, stop right there. You lose, Swordsykins. Henry looks to Mustard, saying, Master. Mustard says, if you're going to call me that, you'd better listen to what I've got to say. You know what you have to do right now, don't you? Casey jumps on Henry's back, saying, we've got to find the rusted sword and rusted shield and return them to Sasayan and Zamazenta. Then we have to get Eternatus to calm down and restore peace to Galar. I love her personality. And Mustard tells him, then you should do just that. Reflections are for after matches, you know. During the match, you must concentrate on the match. Take care of Cub Fu, too, okay? Cub Fu looks to Henry aghast. Henry takes a moment and says, Shield, thank you. And Casey just smiles. Casey then rolls up her sleeve, saying, all right, we've got to narrow down our locations. Which one is on the isle, the sword or the shield? Oh, Miss Oleana messaged me. What's this? After having Miss Poison carefully examine Eternatus' poison, she figured out what ingredients would be needed for an antidote. Among those ingredients, it seems that sap harvested from a foggy morning on the Isle of Armor is needed. Please make sure to procure some. Sap harvested on a foggy morning? Do you have any idea, Master? Mustard says, sap, huh? I might have heard of it, but maybe not. What about you, honey? Honey says, this is news to me. Hyde chimes in, questioning, there was some nectar in the antidote we gave Sword, right, Clara? Clara says, all Miss Poison said was nectar, so we used some applin nectar, I think. Marvin questions, nectar and sap are different things, aren't they? Clara says, huh? I have no idea. I wouldn't know. Marvin then asks, could you take us there? Clara says, huh? Now she thinks to herself, I wouldn't get anything out of that, though. Avery thinks to himself then, now's my chance to recover. He then addresses Casey, saying, please leave it to me. With my psychic powers, I, Avery, will search for where to find the sap harvested on a foggy morning. Okay, finally Avery gets to do something. He was really getting overshadowed by Clara there. Alright, next up we have chapter 33 titled Whoosh to the Forest of Focus. Nice little cover page of Cub Fu giving a kick. The Pokeballs around Avery's head start to spinning, and he sends out one ball, bringing out the Galarian Slowbro. Marvin then says, so this is a psychic's telekinesis? Clara thinks to herself, we both caught a Slowpoke as soon as we arrived on the island, but when did his evolve into a Slowbro? They must have been training in secret. What a pain. Though she openly says, wow, that was amazing, but why not just throw it with your hands? Oh, God. Really? Casey says, now that you mention it. And Marvin says, the way he moves is also unnecessarily long and flashy. Avery is taken aback, thinking, they said the one thing that's been hurting me since childhood. The rage, the frustration, the sadness. It's crushing my heart. Then Henry chimes in, saying, I think there's a better use for your powers. Let's see. Oh, there's an Abra. Use 4. Us 4 and Avery should try to catch it with a Pokeball at the same time. Clara says, what? But it's so far. And why me too? Casey says, we won't be able to throw it far enough. Henry says, it's fine, just try it. Henry says, ready, set, go! And they all launch their Pokeballs, with only Avery's actually being able to get it. That actually is kind of cool. And especially if you've played some of the games where like distance actually matters, with kind of sneaking up on Pokeball, getting that surprise shot, and that allows you to delay their movements because they'll hesitate and won't send out their first attack. Makes it easier for you to catch them too. Henry says, see, your power lets you throw further, right? Avery says, yes. As far as I can see the target. Henry explains, with telekinesis, you can catch Pokemon that run away as soon as you get close. Oh, Wormpod! And Skarmory, You could also reach Pokemon who are flying too high up that you couldn't challenge otherwise. Your power opens new possibilities that you couldn't reach by throwing with your hand. Avery's utterly taken aback, thinking to himself, what is this? My head feels hot and hazy. My face is beaming, and my teeth are showing. This is a feeling that I'd forgotten long ago. The feeling of joy. I'll raise this arbor with lots of care as a token of my appreciation. He then tells them, well, with this you must finally understand how capable I am. I'm going to be misty tomorrow morning, so I wish to rest tonight. Marvin then asks, can't you change the weather with your psychic powers? Avery says, that's beyond my control. Clara then looks to Henry saying, oh, after all I did for him, how ungrateful. As they walk through the doors, Henry's hair gets caught in the door, with Casey saying, you have to do something about that hair before we leave, which wasn't said in an exclamation bubble. That's weird. Henry says, but this island doesn't have, and Clara finishes, any beauty parlor. Serves you right. Though Avery says, you must have thought there was one because of how stylish the matron is. Clara then chimes in saying, shall I style your hair? I feel a little like doing it. Henry thinks, you can do that. Clara says, I've styled my own hair ever since I became an idol. With Casey, Henry, and Marvin all thinking of Henry with Clara's haircut. She says, what are you imagining? He then says, I also did the hair of the other pupils. Henry says, yeah, then I'll leave it to you. With a little bit of snipping, Clara says, easy peasy, ta-da! The Isle of Armor hairstyle with the bun. Marvin says, wow. And Casey says, you look so tough, Sword. Henry starts to blush, saying, really? Casey then chimes in, saying, that looks so nice, Clara. Please do it to me as well. Clara says, sure. She loves the attention. Marvin says, looks like Clara is having fun. Henry says, yes, I guess there are some things she doesn't hate doing after all. As Mustard approaches and says, oh, did Clara give you a haircut, Sword? How about a new outfit to match your new style? You may not officially be a student here, but it would make me happy if you wore this for as long as you stay on the island. Shall I give Marvin one as well? Marvin thinks on it for a moment, and then Mustard says, you don't look very enthusiastic. Is that a no? Marvin says, that's not it, but Casey then chimes in saying, by the way, we haven't heard anything from Marnie and the rest who went to the Crown Tundra, right? Unless the railway is delayed, they should arrive by now. While Clara is saying, hey, don't move. Oh, cutting over to the B-plot. In the Crown Tundra, where Peony has his Caparaja use heavy slam against Marty's Morgrim, Peonia starts stomping her foot, saying, enough already, it looks like you're losing. Bade says, that's why you should have left it to me. Hop says, Fairy is weak against steel, right? Hop says, that's why I told Marnie to switch out Morgrim, who is a dark and fairy type. Oh, Marnie gets visibly annoyed, saying, it's so annoying. Oh, that's why she did this. I wondered, because something starts to happen within Morgrim. And Marnie says, I've been waiting for this. Suddenly, Caparaj's trunk is lifted up as Morgrim evolves into one of my favorite Pokemon, Grimmsnarl. I always have me a Grimmsnarl lately. Grimmsnarl was on one of my best teams when I was finishing up Pokemon Sword. And I even had him when I was doing Pokemon Violet when I got one. The moment I found me an Impidimp, I was just like, come here, baby. Although I had a better time with Grimmsnarl and Sword than I did in Pokemon Violet, I'll say that much. Hop says, it evolved into Grimmsnarl. Yep. And then Marnie has Grimmsnarl use Hammer Arm. And oof, yeah, fighting type move against a steel type. Yep, yeah, boy. Utterly decimates Caparaja. He's lying in the snow saying, utter defeat. There's no denying your strength. Marnie says, please this punch. Then, as promised, Nia is free to do what she wants. Nia grabs onto Marnie's arm saying, you did it. She races off saying, later, old man, I'm going to have fun in a max lair. I don't feel like partnering with you. With Peony calling out, hey, call me Papa. Although annoyed, he's obviously smiling, saying, I know I'm being embarrassing. I just don't want us to grow apart. With Bade looking upon the scene with sad eyes. Oh, I get it. I was kind of wondering how this all will go down. As Peonia just races off waving. I'm realizing it's really weird for me to call her Peonia. It's just easier to call her Nia, because I'm so used to calling her Nia. Nia races off, smiling and waving. Peony says, "Still, when I see how much fun she's having, I think it's good that I lost. She's been trying to be independent for a while now." Bade then chimes in, questioning, "But then all your effort you spent into planning this exploration tour would be wasted, right?" Blushing a little and hesitant, Bade says, "Is it okay if I go on that tour with you instead?" Peony says, "Huh?" While Bade says, "We thought it sounded fun, and who knows, maybe we'll cross paths with her." Hop is aghast. I keep saying aghast. Hop is shocked, saying, "Hey, we have an important mission." Though Marnie chimes in, saying, "Wait, Hop, it might not be a bad idea." in the words of the ghoul from Fallout, "Thou shalt be caught by random BS. Thou shalt get sidetracked by random BS. Side quest, baby." Hop says, "What?" Well, Marnie steps forward, saying, "Peony, can you tell me the details about this exploration tour?" Peony explains, "We will rent a room in the only inhabited village on this tundra, Freezington. Somewhere in the tundra there is a legendary mysterious place. There's no way I would let Nia get in any danger, so I looked into it thoroughly." Marnie looks to the other, saying, "We don't know anything about the Crown Tundra, right? We should use this to look for Henry, the rusted sword and rusted shield." Actually, yeah, that's a good plan. With Bade saying, "Exactly. If Peony helped us, then it would be mutually beneficial. That's why I came up with the proposal." Hop just pats him on the shoulder, saying, Yeah, whatever you say, Bade." I actually kind of like this a little bit better. Like, I don't know, this is an interesting little idea. Marnie asks, "Well?" Peony grabs Bade by the shoulder, saying, "Sure, I'll be borrowing the young man with the swirly hair." "Okay, but this is only until Nia comes back. Now that we're done talking, let's commence the operation. To Freezington!" And Marnie cheers, "Yeah!" She then brings out her Rotom phone, saying, "Oh, I've got tons of mail from S.H.I.E.L.D. She then informs them they found Henry. We then cut to the next morning where we see, I'm already forgetting his name. Hyde. There we go, Hyde. Washing his face outside. Oh, I should have just kept reading because Marvin says it as he's walking over with his Drizzle, saying, "Morning, Hyde." And Hyde says, "Morning, Marvin." As Marvin and Hyde are looking around, I kind of like that they're around the same age. Marvin says, "Seems like there's no mist." Hyde says, "This place and the forest have different climates. You won't know until you check it out." A voice calls out, "Morning!" And Hyde is a little taken aback as we see Henry and Casey decked out in the dojo outfit of the Isle of Armor. And I love that Kung Fu's hiding behind Henry's leg. It's so good. It's so good. I don't know why I'm enjoying this so much. I just really like this storyline. Hyde says, "You look like proper students. It would be great if you three stayed here to train." With Marvin saying, "This seems familiar." Casey then adds in, "Wouldn't it be great if everything sorted itself out, right? It would be great if everything sorted itself out, right?" With Marvin saying, "Yeah." Enter Avery and Clara, with Avery saying, "Good morning to everyone. Let us depart now." With Henry chiming in, saying, "Are you coming as well, Clara?" With Clara saying, "What, you don't want me to go?" So Clara thinks to herself, "He got the jump on me by evolving Slowpoke. I won't let him pull ahead any further." Avery then points out to the wild, saying, "This is the soothing wetlands. The forest of focus lies within the heart of the wetlands. To avoid any battles with wild Pokémon, let's cut through in one fell swoop." As they make their way through, several Pokémon start training on them, which I do kind of love about the wild, because you'll encounter some Pokémon here and there. With Henry saying, "Shield, where are the sword and shield?" Casey's on her tablet using her little drone flies, saying, "I have the Vikavolt drone looking on autopilot, but it hasn't found anything yet." As they make their way to the edge of the forest, Avery's out of breath, saying, "This is it, the forest of focus." Casey yells out, "There's mist coming out of it." While Henry questions, "Are you all right, Avery?" Avery says, "Because I rely so much on my psychic powers, I don't get a lot of exercise." Though Casey slaps him on the back, saying, "Avery, find the right tree with your psychic abilities. With Avery being taken off guard, Avery remembers his words, which said, with my psychic powers, I, Avery, will search for where to find the sap on a foggy morning. With Avery thinking, I ran my mouth because I wanted them to be in awe of my telekinesis. Avery takes a moment saying, now then, let's see. How can I find it most efficiently with my abilities? Only for an, what was it? Is it fungus or amungus? I always get mixed up with the names. I think it's a fungus. Just slamming him on the face. Oh, several Pokemon. There's Venipede and, Krogunk. Oh, no, there's Skalliopede. Trampling over him. He says, what is happening? Henry calls out, Avery. Henry sends out his Mr. Rhyme, while Casey sends out her, Stunfisk. Yeah, there we go. As they start to battle the wild Pokemon, Kubfu observes, watching the apt battle raging on. He grows emboldened, and Kubfu decides to leap in, downing a Skalliopod. Casey saying, it's so strong! And Kubfu, actually feeling emboldened by its own power, just starts taking out the wild Pokemon left and right. So Clara steps in saying, wait, stop! Only for her to get hit as well. Kubfu starts to panic. Henry calls out, Clara, are you alright? While Casey said, jumping in the middle of a Pokemon battle is dangerous. So Clara looks to the other Pokemon saying, I don't think those Pokemon were trying to attack us though. There are only poison-type Pokemon here, right? But they were acting unusual. Normally they stay in the heart of the forest. Maybe they're here because they're away from something. Marvin says, so that's why you jumped into danger. You were trying to protect them from Kubfu. As Casey says, as expected, someone who wants to be a poison-type gym leader. So Clara just thinks to herself, it's not as if I particularly like poison types, nor am I particularly attached to them. I just had a bad feeling about this. Casey says, hey, maybe. Scan for any goods from poison Pokemon. I'll transfer their data, the data of their traces and movement. As Casey sends out the drone, Henry realizes something. Looking around, calling out to Kubfu, he finds it sitting pensively behind a tree. Clara questions, it probably thinks it went too far, right? Avery adds, it must have gotten scared and attacked without thinking. Or maybe it was just trying to be helpful with its power and is now upset. Clara adds, he got carried away and overdid it. Now he's suddenly reflecting on his actions and about how he'll act in the future. Avery says, indeed, you reflect, move on, get carried away again, get scolded again, and so the cycle continues. Avery and Clara get real quiet for a moment, and then Clara says, it's okay to keep trying. As Avery says, yes, it's not over yet. Casey then shouts, I found it! The place where the poison Pokemon were running from. Avery says, then let us proceed. Clara says, yeah. Henry puts a hand on Kubfu's shoulder saying, let's go, Kubfu. Let's be careful from now on, alright? As they wander through, they see some rather lethargic-looking Pokemon. Henry says, we must be getting closer. Casey says, yeah, all the Pokemon seem poisoned. And they come upon a tree, and they see the Pokemon licking it. Henry says, the poisoned Pokemon are licking that tree. That means, Casey shouts, Clara, get Miss Poison to analyze the 3-stop we just scanned. Clara says, huh, again? While the people are busy, Kubfu saunters away. As Clara shows them her phone, she tells them, this is the sap that gets released in foggy mornings. We only need this much. So the drone starts taking a sample. As Casey says, all right, begin the operation. Marvin asks, is it really okay to harvest this tree sap? Clara says, I believe it should be fine. As Avery says, the poison Pokemon are using it to recover as well. Oh. As they get the fill, Casey says, harvesting complete. Now, I'll remove the capsule with the tree sap inside of it. But as she removes the capsule, Kubfu takes it and runs off. I wonder what's on the little guy's mind. Alright, and the last chapter we'll be looking at is chapter 34. Bam! Incredible evolutions of the 3 Pokemon. Okay. I mean, it's kind of telling you exactly what's about to happen, and I say it's about time. They've been in these forms for too long. And a bit of a recap, Sword and the gang on the Isle of Armor set out to find the tree sap, which could only be found on a foggy morning. And on the night before, while Sword and Shield had their hair done by Clara, we cut over to Crown Tundra Freezington, where Peony shouts, "There it is! I rent this puny house for a lodging, but from here on, this will be ours. Be our hideout." And he puts out his flag. I think it's the mayor who comes out saying, "Welcome back, Peony." Yep, the mayor. As Peony says, "Yo, mayor." The mayor says, "I turned the heating on in advance. You'll be happy to know that inside of this puny lodging is very well equipped." The mayor then says, "We have 2 extra people." Oh no, Peony says, "We have 2 extra people. There's no problem with that, is there?" The mayor says, "No, it's fine. The little lady's friends, you must be Peonia. Your father must dote a lot on a pretty little girl like you," he says to Bade. As Marnie and Hop turn away to giggle, Bade says, "What are you 2 laughing at?" The mayor then says, "Oh wait, you're a boy. And I suppose you must be Peony's daughter," he says to Marnie, with Marnie saying, "No way, stop it." Peony then says, "Hey mayor, you're going a bit too far with your jokes. Anyway, thanks for hosting us." As they enter in, there's a whole setup with food and everything. Nice. Marnie blows into her hand saying, "Warm," with Hop seeing the spread saying, "Even prepared dinner." Peony says, "Let's have a party to celebrate our new team. Let's have a..." Oh, and it just repeats, "Oops." But they all raise a glass saying, "Cheers." Peony wipes his face saying, "These parts are home to some mysterious legends. Firstly, a Pokemon with a giant head known as the King of Bountiful Harvests. Yep. Secondly, there are legendary Pokemon that fly around near a giant red tree. And last but not least, some strange ruins where a bunch of roaming titans sleep. We are going to devote ourselves to confirming whether these legends are true or not. We, the Peony Exploration Team, have an enormous task ahead of us." Hop gets excited, saying, "Whoa, this is actually pretty exciting." While Marnie says, "Just don't forget why we're really here, Hop." While Bade says, "I've had enough of your hyper attitude." Peony just laughs it off, saying, "Anyway, I've told you what you need to know for tomorrow's exploration. Get a good rest. It will be a tough journey." "Oh, yeah, that's right. You still haven't told me your names yet." Bade says, "It's Bade. My name is Bade. I'm Hop. Marnie." Peony then says, "Bade, Hop, Marnie." The next morning, the Isle of Armor in the Forest of Focus, as Casey has gotten the sap, she says, "The tree sap that can only be found on a foggy morning has now been harvested. We also have tons left that we can use as a cure." Marvin then asks, "Isn't there any sap left in the tree?" I think it's Clara who says, "Most sap will come out the next time there's a foggy morning, according to Miss Poison." The Kubfu, I don't know, he gets eager. He leaps in and takes the vial. Oh, maybe he doesn't want them to leave. Casey calls out, "Kubfu, what are you doing? Give it back." And Kubfu just races off. Casey then sends out her Raboot saying, "Bit, get it back." As Raboot comes in and sweet kicks Kubfu, Kubfu manages to stand it, keep his positioning, and uses his fall to give a kick to Raboot's face. Avery says, "What a splendid exchange of kicking moves. I wouldn't expect anything less from someone trained by the master himself." Clara then questions, "Seriously, after all that reflection from earlier, he goes and pulls this?" Kubfu has a very desperate look on his face, and Raboot pauses. Casey says, "Huh? It seems like they're started talking to each other." And then Raboot just ushers Kubfu off with... I love that. See, it's one of those moments that kind of shows that, yeah, Pokemon obey their trainers until they have a reason not to. Like that kind of questioning is just like, are they slaves? Like, no, the Pokemon could leave at any moment. If the Pokemon is done, they can either just not fight or book it. Watching this case, he says, "It's going with him?" Henry says, "How odd." Oh, as they follow, they come upon Azura, who is very under the weather. Oh, yeah, without the sap, certain Pokemon who have been poisoned have no way to recover. Henry kneels down saying, "It's Azura, and it's poisoned. Perhaps it used up all its strength trying to reach the tree with the sap." Then Kubfu noticed it, but then Kubfu heard us say that we harvested it all up. Clara questions, "So you're saying he wanted to share the tree sap?" Avery states, "Even though it would cause us to fail our task, Kubfu wanted to help the Zora no matter what." Casey shouts, "Oh, I didn't know whether we should praise him or scold him." So Marvin then questions, "Shouldn't we praise him for trying to do the right thing? You were the one who said something along those lines, Shield." Casey says, "Did I say that?" Marvin says, Shouldn't we apologize to Kung-Fu for wrongly scolding him? Henry says, you did well to notice, Kung-Fu. But Casey's saying, sorry for attacking you with bits. Clara then chimes in saying, but none of us would have misunderstood you if you had just explained what you were doing in the first place. You should have just told us that you wanted to share the tree sap with the poison Zora. Marvin, observing this, thinks, Kung-Fu's starting to get confused. Maybe we should give him a break. Yeah, I mean, I gotta admit, there are other ways of getting someone's attention. Observing the Zoroa, Clara says, we should be able to treat him with a regular antidote. Now Avery says, wait a moment, this Zoro is a wild Pokemon. We shouldn't meddle too much with it. We should teach it how to treat itself naturally, within the forest, even without the tree sap. Marvin says, a Petraberry. Avery says, indeed. Marvin points to a tree, saying, the tree has some. I'll have to shake the tree to knock some down. Yeah, from one of the game mechanics. Let's go! And he shakes it. He then says, looks like we didn't get any Petraberries. He then sends out his Dracovish? Yeah, Dracovish. Saying, okay, what's his name in the thing? Draco. Draco, give it a good slam. But as Marvin's doing that, Clara looks around wondering, I wonder why they all go for the tree sap, even though there are Petraberries here as well. Could it be? And as Dracovish slams into the tree, a whole bunch of berries fall. Oh, there's only one reason why most of the Pokemon wouldn't be able to get a berry like this. Marvin says, look, Kung-Fu, there's a Petraberry. Let's give it to the Zoro so he can... Well, suddenly, something hits Dracovish hard. Marvin goes all over saying, Draco! But then he's shocked, seeing a Greedent and several Scovel. Yeah, that's why you don't hit the bush too many times. Clara says, I knew it. There was a berry gang in the forest. Marvin says, berry gang? Clara explains, the Zora was closer to the Petraberry, but it still exhausted itself to get to the tree sap. Didn't you think that was strange? Greeted, even amongst other Scovel and Greedent. Greedy even amongst other Scovel and Greedent. This group won't let other Pokemon or humans take any berries. The berry gang. That's what I call them anyway. I kind of love it. The berry gang. Is this the first time we've seen a Greedent or a Scovel? No. Oh, and the berry gang just start mogging them, rushing in, taking all the berries. Marvin says, all the berries are gone. But Kung-Fu gets deadly serious, putting up his dukes, rushing into action, just start banging on into the Squoval. Oh, but because they had the berries in their mouths, they fall back, eat the berry, come back even stronger. Oh, yeah, the power of berries. You don't really display that too often. Friggin' held items. Mara says, no matter how many we beat, they keep coming back. As the Squoval start mogging on Kung-Fu. Casey says, they're eating the berries stored away in their cheeks so that they can heal themselves. Henry sends in his Thwacky. Marvin sends in his Drizzler, or is that the nickname? Drizzle. And Casey sends in her Raboot. As Henry says, everyone, let's coordinate our attacks. But as everybody else fights, Thwacky observes, waits for the beat, and then bumps his sticks together, catching Drizzle and Raboot's attention. They nod to each other. Drizzle sends in some of his bombs. They blow up, downing some of the Squoval, who are rejuvenated by the berries. Raboot comes in, knocking them all back. Avery says, oh, I see. Drizzle damages them with the bubbles he scattered, and Raboot targets the weakened gang members who are eating a berry. Little by little, their gang members are decreasing. Then Thwacky uses his instruments to tell Drizzle and Raboot where their numbers have gone down and where to attack next. Thanks to Thwacky surveying the state of the battlefield, Drizzle and Raboot can fully concentrate on attacking. It's impressive, even enough that Thwacky is able to use his drumsticks to give out such precise orders. It must have trained to do so since it was a Grookey. But even more impressive is how the three of them work in such synchronicity, you mean? Like an ensemble that has been raised together. And thus they all evolve into Inteleon, Rillaboom, and Scorbunny. Cinderace. But Greedent tries to go after Rillaboom, but Rillaboom notices this, brings out its drums, and uses drum beating in order to take out Greedent. But Greedent eats the berries. But Cinderace brings up a little pebble, brings it into a flaming ball, while Inteleon just aims and uses Snipe Shot, while Cinderace uses Pyro Ball. Friggin' tag teaming. Avery says, that was amazing. All three of them evolved at the same time. Their coordination was magnificent. While Clara says, Rillaboom was like a bandmaster. Then they think to each other, think to themselves, thank goodness they aren't students of the dojo. Though Henry questions, bandmaster? Clara says, bandmaster is someone who leads a band. A leader, so to speak, is someone pivotal in an orchestra. Avery says, indeed. Furthermore, he was able to give out orders from the back rather than fighting on the front line. That's not something Pokemon can usually do, not like us humans anyway. Clara says, that's right. Usually when you give out orders to others, they brush you aside thinking you're just being self-centered. Casey then adds, you guys might think that way when giving orders, but most people aren't like that. Clara and Avery take that as a blow to the ego. Henry then says, that's a Petra Berry. Kung-Fu, give it to Zora. And Kung-Fu does just that, and Zora's back healed. Henry then says, well then, let's quickly send out the tree sap. Casey says, right then, I'll let Oleana know as well. Oh, that was a fast reply. Marvin says, I wouldn't expect anything less. Rose's secretary sure is efficient. Casey says, she says that a logistics employee from Macrocosmos is waiting at the gate of the railway station. Avery says, leave it to me. Report to her that Avery will deliver it to the Rusted Sword and Rusted Shield research party while you guys continue Kung-Fu's training. Clara thinks to herself, this show-off is trying to claim all the glory for himself again. She then knocks Avery to the side saying, yes, the two of us will deliver it to the railway station. And she tries to take the capsule, but Avery says, don't you worry yourself, Clara. Clara says, I can't help but be worried. There are a lot of dangerous Pokemon on the way there. It would be trouble. It could be trouble. We should go together. And as they race off, Marvin questions, will they really be okay? And Casey says, we're going, Marvin. And so they head off, training up Kung-Fu against several opponents until they reach the Challenge Road. As they reach the top, Casey cries out, wow, what a nice view. You and Kung-Fu looking fresh too. And he says, well, it's been a while since I could take in scenery like this. Suddenly, there's a communique on her pad. Henry asks, what's up, Shield? Casey says, the drone scanner's reacting to something. It has the same readings as the Rusted Sword and Rusted Shield materials. Oh, I guess that's the end. You know, despite it being very much side quest oriented, I am actually having a lot of fun with this just because I enjoyed the Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra, but I always felt like more could be going on there. I wish there were other trainers that you could really interact with more so as you were exploring, or even just having some of your rivals involved. And with this, it's like, oh, I like how this is being done a lot better. I don't know, it's just something that adds a little bit more to something that I actually already enjoyed, because I did enjoy the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra. I just wish there were more elements that made me feel more immersed in it. So I'm enjoying this so far, and we're kind of winding things down. Well, it's nice to have this little bit of extra exploration with the gang, instead of just having everything end off with the battle with Eternatus. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Also remember to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the ride. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din, and I hope to see you later. So then, take care. Bye-bye.